It gets emotional next on the Richard and Judy Book Club podcast, exclusive to WHSmith.
It was about 1 a.m. when I got home from the Rainbow. The pub was dark and my parents were in bed. I climbed the back stairs, walked past Matty's room and onto my own. I undressed, pulling the ribbons from my hair, looking around at the sage and lilac walls. I got into bed. What did I do? What did I think about before the events of that night shunted everything else out of the way?
Well, the final book on our summer reading list might have you reaching for a hanky or two. In fact, I guarantee it will. But it won't leave you feeling gloomy.
It's called The Last Act of Love. It's an absolutely fantastic book that you honestly really have to read.
Did I read? It seems likely. I read everything from Jane Austen to Jilly Cooper. I'd recently discovered Julian Barnes at sixth form, and I wanted to study French so that I could live in an attic in Paris and read Flaubert in his own language. I loved the thought of myself as someone who read novels in French. Of course, back then, reading was still a pleasure and not a defence. This was the last night I wouldn't fear closing my eyes for what I might see. The last night I wasn't in terror of what might happen by the time I woke up.
The Richard and Judy Book Club, going deeper into the story behind the cover.
Well, hello again. Welcome to the Richard and Judy Book Club in conjunction with WHSmith. I'm delighted to say that our next book, it isn't a novel, it's absolutely true. It's deeply, deeply moving, but also it's extremely and oddly life-affirming. It's The Last Act of Love, and it's written by Cathy Rentzenbrink, and she's here now. Cathy, this is obviously a hugely, hugely personal book for you. In a sense, it couldn't be more personal. Would you just like to tell the listeners, take us through it, what actually happened to you, your brother Matty years ago?
So we were a very happy family living in Yorkshire, and then one night my brother Matty, so I was 17 and he was 16, so he was 13 months younger than me and he was 9 inches taller than me. He was a great, tall, clever, bright, funny boy, and he was knocked over by a car that didn't stop, and I wasn't with him, but the driver behind the car that didn't stop came into our village. And so very shortly afterwards, I was kneeling by him in the road, and then the ambulance arrived. And he was taken to a hospital where they resuscitated him and intubated him, so he nearly died, but he didn't die. And they did emergency brain surgery on him, and of course we just desperately wanted him to live, and I was praying for him to live, even though I was a 17-year-old firm atheist. I was praying for him to live, but and he did live, but he never really recovered. And at the time I didn't know anything about head injury or what that might mean, so it was a complete shock to us all. We were only thinking that it was life or death. We didn't realise there were all these shades in the middle.
He was in what's known as a persistent vegetative state.
Yes.
So he was absolutely switched off, as it were, intellectually. There was nothing going on there.
No, so he had periods of sleep and wake. So his eyes would open for a time when he was awake, and then his eyes would close when he was asleep. At the very beginning, he would sometimes move his head. So one of the things I used to do was sort of make up stories and dance around him. So I tried to get him to move his head and track me, and he would do that. But then another thing that sometimes happens to people with head injuries is that they then have epilepsy. So he had extremely severe epilepsy, and then he would have these huge, enormous, life-threatening epileptic fits, and then they wiped out even that tiny amount of progress. I remember my mum said she felt it was like watching a snail crawl up a wall and then just keep getting knocked off. So incredibly small bits of progress, like he would be able to turn his head a bit, but then he'd have an epileptic fit.
And how long after all this began, what was the point where you lost hope? Where you stopped thinking maybe one day he'll wake up out of this, he'll slowly come back to us?
I think the most difficult thing for me to do in working it all out is trying to work that out, actually, because I think I probably lost hope long before I admitted it even to myself. And then even after I knew, I didn't dare say it aloud to anyone for ages because it just felt so wrong. But when I look back now, I think after a couple of years, I'd realised that he wasn't going to get better. And then I entered a period of trying to love him as he was, But then it was after 4.5 years. I went to France for a year as part of my degree course, and I think it was that distance. Because when I came home, I saw that it was wrong. I saw that it was destroying my parents.
You mean keeping him alive was wrong?
Because we built a bungalow extension to our pub. We had him living at home. And I came home and I saw that my mother had been transformed into this, you know, because she's so sweet and young and pretty, and I saw she'd been transformed into this sort of old person, and my dad was all bent over, and I saw how terrible they were. But equally, I just saw, I'd never asked myself this question before, I realised that Matty himself would not like to be alive in that way.
So this went on for 8 years in total. And in the end, we all remember reading about, the first time I ever heard the phrase persistent vegetative state was about the boy Tony Bland, who was critically injured in the Hillsborough disaster. And he was in a persistent vegetative state for years. And actually his parents, in the end, they had to go to court to get permission to switch off his systems. And that is basically, in the end, what you and your family decided to do for Matty.
It was. Tony Bland was the first case, and I always remember hearing about it. And then I said to my parents, I think we have to do the same thing. And we were, I think, the 12th case. And yeah, it's so sad, isn't it? I think Tony Bland, I remember seeing it on the television news and realising it could be Matty, because the thing with people in that condition is they do sort of look the same. They're often young men, because they've been involved in sporting or road accidents often. They're often young men, shaved, you know, hair kept shaved and then kept very close. And then it's a similar sort of non-expression.
Yes, you talk about the deterioration of Matty and how he looked, and that must have been incredibly distressing. And for your, I mean, you know, incredibly distressing for you, obviously, from the way you've written about it, but for your parents, for your mother.
But I think it's really important to say that The Last Act of Love is in no way a gloomy book or a depressing book. As Judy said in her introduction then, it's actually life-affirming. It's quite funny in parts and all the rest of it. I mean, your parents run a pub in Yorkshire, and you talk about how life goes on, you know, and there are great drunken scenes at the pub and frolics and fun and all the rest of it. So did you, when you were having fun, in these 8 years or so, did you feel sort of guilty that in some way you were not sort of sitting with your head bowed and your hands pressed together at his bedside, that you were actually getting on with your life and having fun and enjoying yourself?
Yeah, that's such a brilliant question, because I did, and actually I still do to a certain extent, I think. Yeah, I've been reading a lot about sort of survivor guilt in siblings, and I've realised that I, certainly back then, I think as well it's something to do with the fact that what had happened to Matty was so enormous, and obviously I was so full of pain just because I loved him. But equally it meant I was only 17, I wasn't fully formed myself as a person. So I just I grew up in this strange way, kind of like full of pain. But equally, nothing that happened to me ever really seemed relevant, because when something like that has happened to one of these two kids, who cares about whether the other one gets good A-level results? I mean, it's just laughable, isn't it?
Well, you mentioned exam results. I mean, 2 weeks after this terrible thing happened to him, he did get his GCSE results, or your family did, and they were the best in the school, weren't they? He was the top boy.
Yeah, he was very, very smart. He wanted to be a surgeon. Again, it's that thing of life looked so good and happy and rosy and positive, and then just everything changed in that moment.
Has that made you feel very insecure as an adult?
Yeah, it does, because I see risk everywhere.
Yeah.
And one of the main struggles with living, actually, the problem is when you see risk everywhere, when you know that the worst can happen any moment, of course, the worst doesn't happen every moment, but if you live as though it's about to, it means you don't love properly. So that's what I struggle with all the time. I'm always trying to protect myself from properly engaging with life or people, because I worry that then they'll get knocked over by a bus and I'll be sad.
So does it make you think that life is just completely random?
Yeah. At some levels, I'm incredibly cynical and not surprised because I'm always expecting horrible things to happen.
Sure.
So I'm not surprised when they do.
And do you think, I mean, now looking back, and this is a strange question. I hope it doesn't sound callous, but I get the impression that it would have been better for all of you, including Matty, if he died that night.
Yes, I think that is absolutely true, and I think that would have obviously been awful. But the way I feel of it now is that his life ended in that road, and it should have ended in that road. And the major psychological damage that I do feel, because again, bad things do happen, don't they? People do get killed in accidents. But I think that what happened in the following 8 years was really cruel and unusual, and that's why I think it's a societal problem.
Well, it's quintessentially modern, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
if he'd been hit by a brewer's dray, 100 years before, he would have died that night or the next
would have
day.
done, yeah.
And you wouldn't. These dilemmas wouldn't be presented to
That's
us
right.
to try and wrestle with and to solve. The question which I really wanted to ask at the beginning, but I thought I'd keep it to last, really, is: did they ever find the driver?
Yes, they did, and he was prosecuted for driving without due care and attention.
What did he get?
He was fined £180.
And that was it.
End of
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, I think that the thing they explained to us at the time that if in a road accident, if the person doesn't actually die, then it's no different from hitting a tree. Apparently.
What?
I know.
And did he know he'd hit somebody?
Yes, I think so. So.
And he got £180
Yeah.
fine. Well, I guess, as you say, life's random, and I guess it's also 100% unjust, isn't it?
It is.
that's an outcome.
I don't know. It's a funny thing because I often, like at events, people really want me to be angry with him, and I don't. So I don't really quite know why I do. I don't know. Maybe I just feel it would be
Waste of
a
energy.
waste of my emotions, or
Yeah.
it's almost that I don't want. I don't know. I don't want the story of Matty almost to be muddied by me getting wound up
Yeah.
about how it happened in a way. So
Yeah.
I tend to not really think about it. The other thing I think is that if I did that to someone, I'm not sure. I just possibly over empathise. I just think how horrible I would feel if I'd done that. So.
I wonder, you're still pretty young, I wonder if one day, this sense that life is random and the worst can and does happen, I wonder if you'll ever find religion.
That's a very good question. Loads of people do. So I was reading this article recently about people with missing siblings, people whose siblings have gone missing, and like all of them have found religion.
Really?
I do feel the stirrings sometimes, but I don't trust it in myself.
No.
I think it would be so easy and delightful, I think. I would love to... there's a really nice Julian Barnes quote where he says, "I don't believe in God, but I miss him." So I
yes.
feel this kind of yearning. I go into churches. I think you can enjoy the building and the history and the sense of lives lived and other people's
But that's not the
suffering.
point, is it?
And I like candles now. I will light a candle in a church and sit and spend some time. But I don't trust my spiritual yearnings.
You have a child, at least one child,
I
don't
do,
you?
yes, one.
And how old is he now?
He's 6.
He's 6.
And again, I find that a miracle because for years I thought I wouldn't be able to have children because I thought I think I survived what happened to my brother by the skin of my teeth. It still seems miraculous to me that I managed to survive what happened in those 8 years and to survive feeling culpable in his death because I had to bring it about. And I just thought, I don't think I can ever have children because I don't think I'd survive it. But, things do change and you do find a measure of, I don't know, getting betterness. And so, but I only realised quite recently, because I only have one child, and I only realised quite recently it's because I just can't bear to have another one because I can't bear the thought of inflicting the pattern
loss.
on one of
Yes,
and
yeah.
I didn't realise that.
How
I didn't realise
interesting.
that was what I thought.
So the
Quite
psychological
recently.
impact of these things goes so deep, doesn't
On
it?
and on and on, I think.
The picture on the front of the book, by the way, shows two charming children, brother and sister, aged, I guess, about 6 and 7, 7 and 8. Is that you?
That's
Ian?
us,
you?
yeah.
It's a lovely picture.
Yeah, and I love the way, if you look at Matty's face, his expression is so full of expectancy,
Isn't
he?
it? Yes, that's
you
the
feel
word.
nothing bad is ever going to happen
And
to
you
that
look very
little
happy.
boy.
It's a lovely
Yeah.
picture. Well, it's terrific to talk to you. We were so looking forward to meeting you, and it hasn't disappointed. Thank you. The book is The Last Act of Love, and if you buy it from WHSmith, as Judy said at the beginning, that's our partners in the Richard and Judy Book Club. There only you will get, from that store, you will get a lot of extra content in the back. And in this case, it's particularly, as you can imagine, fascinating content. Q&A with Cathy, lots of extra material, information on how to go to the website. But it's only if you get the book from WHSmith, so it's just worth pointing that out. It's been lovely to meet you.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes.
I'm Cathy Rentzenbrink, and I have written a book called The Last Act of Love. I really love being a writer. I really love talking to other writers about the process. I'm quite a nerd. I'm fascinated about things like, present tense, what kind of point of view, how long things should be. I could just endlessly discuss writer process. And it's a great joy for me that I do interview authors, and so I really enjoy doing that. And I really enjoy talking to readers. Some writers don't like to think about the reader, but I feel with my book, it's just the opening part of a conversation. I just feel I've made the first entree in the conversation, and I'm always happy to hear what other people think. I absolutely love doing events and meeting people. It feels like a massive privilege. I really love the idea stage of writing. I couldn't tell you how many titles I've got in my head, how many potential stories, how many brilliant first lines. So I really like that bit, and then the middle is incredibly hard, and then at some point the fog clears and I see the end in view. And the best thing actually is having an agent and an editor to talk about things with. Sometimes I think it's a miracle this book exists at all. There's so many reasons why I didn't think I could write it, why I shouldn't have written it, and somehow, and I still don't know why, it seems quite magical, I just got over them all bit by bit. It was painful to write. I don't think I ever managed to either write or edit it. There was no session that I didn't cry, so I've sobbed in all the cafes near where I live. But the effect of having written it is beautiful, and possibly the thing I most like is when people tell me or write to me that it has helped them. That just makes me feel amazing. When I found out about the massive excitements of being in this Richard and Judy book club, I was telling my parents about it, and my husband chimed in to say to my dad, he said, you know, it'll be in the window of all the WHSmiths in the country when it's its week. And my dad said, what, even in Falmouth? Which is where they live. So it is much appreciated in our family, and my husband and son are really looking forward to walking down Chiswick High Street and having a sconce in the window of our WHSmiths.
Well, I thought that The Last Act of Love was incredibly beautifully written, in fact. She's a very talented writer, and is going to write a novel soon, her first novel, which I look forward to very much. It is incredibly sad, and you can tell from talking to Cathy, as we just have, that she is still very much affected by what happened to her brother Matty all those years ago. Who could not be? I mean, it's enormously affected her life. But in the end, I think it's a very giving book. It makes you feel, although you understand what the whole family's going through, it gives you almost a blueprint as to how to cope, really.
Yes, and let's explain exactly what did happen. It was a dark night, and her beloved brother, who'd just taken his GCSEs, was knocked over by a hit-and-run driver and suffered horrendous brain injuries, which probably even a decade before, let alone 20 or 30 years before, would have killed him within 12 hours. But because of modern technology and intervention, he was kept alive. He had a series of horrendous fits, and what little brain function he had left after the accident disappeared, and he was in what's become known as the persistent vegetative state. And the whole book really is an exploration of how a loving sister and loving parents and friends and the wider circle of family and friends come to terms with a living death, and how they accommodate it in their daily lives, and how in the end they want to bring it to an end. They want to spare the person the indignity and the pointlessness of their existence.
And I think also that it examines a question which is still very topical today. How far do we go to preserve life under any circumstances, no matter how ill, disabled, comatose a patient is? Are we right to carry on striving to save life? Or actually, would it have been better if Matty had died immediately that night?
And let's make it absolutely clear, this is not a sombre, downbeat book. You'd think it would have to be, given the content of the central story, but it's not. It's actually uplifting, it's warm, it's surprisingly funny at times, and very revealing, and it makes everybody ask themselves what they would do in that situation, but not in a heavy way. And talking to the author was a great experience, because she is still actually going through the process of coming to terms with what happened, and is very honest about that. I think the whole experience of meeting her and reading the book was one of the most memorable ones that I've had this year, actually. But if you possibly can, you don't have to steel yourself to, just read the book. You'll love it.
Remind yourself how great it feels to read a good book. Get a recommendation from Richard and Judy, exclusive to WHSmith.
Hello, my name is John Grisham, and I'm the author of Rogue Lawyer. My favorite part of writing a book is when the thing is finally done and it gets published. The writing itself is it's lonely. It's a one-man job. You can't really collaborate when you write.
If you see a woman pausing by bookshelves in WHSmith's, it will be me, with my fingers up, looking joyous and happy. My name's Jackie Coppleton, and I've written a dictionary of mutual understanding.
Hello, my name is Stuart Neville. All writers have this sort of guilty secret. We all go into bookstores, quietly walk along the aisles so we find our own books and say, just confirm that there are some there on the shelves. Have a little quiet smile to yourself, then slink out again.
I'm the author of The Girl on the Train. My name's Paula Hawkins. I'm quite relaxed about letting go of my work, I think. Once I'm done with it, I'm done with it. I don't really want to keep going back to it.
I'm William Boyd. I'm the author of Sweet Caress.
Every time I'm about to start a novel, I say to myself, how the hell do I do this? I console myself by looking back at the others. So you've done it before. You can pull it off again. But it is a sort of jumping off a cliff moment.
Hello, I'm Lisa Jewell, and I'm the author of The Girls. The feeling I had at the end of writing this book was, thank God I've still got a week until Christmas. I can actually do some Christmas shopping.
I'm Cathy Rentzenbrink, and I have written a book called The Last Act of Love. So my problem isn't do I want to write today, it's which of the 6 ideas that are jumping up and down in my head will I write today.
Hello, I'm Dawn French. I've tried to recently be somebody who says yes to much more, and I certainly wanted to write a character that did that because it's something I admire.
So that's another 8 great titles to add to our book club bookshelves.
We really hope that our latest suggestions will keep you informed and entertained and all the rest of it across the summer.
And we'll be back with a brand new set in the autumn. See you then.
Bye.
Check out WHSmith for great deals on all the titles in the Richard and Judy Book Club. And you can listen back to our archive of podcasts via iTunes.